Hey, what's up, friends? Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 15, Chris Ballew. He's best known for being the lead singer and songwriter for the Presidents of the United States of America. We talk about the millions of records he's sold, playing in Beck's band, being friends with Weird Al, developing Casper Baby Pants. The stories Chris has are countless. So you know what? Whatever you're doing right now, hit the pause button, because this episode you got to listen to now. So here we go. We're not going to wait. Episode 15, Chris Ballew. I am super interested in your journey because to me it's fascinating. Your starts at, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of your early roommates in LA, I want to go back to when you started, but
yeah.
Am I right in saying it's Beck was a roommate for a little bit?
Well, it was more like I was his roommate. I met him in Seattle, and he asked me to join his band so he got signed, and he didn't have a band, and he had to create one. And we met in Seattle, and we hit it off, and he called a few days later and invited me to join his band, which is the short version of the story. And so I was the only band member not from Los Angeles, so he let me live with him at his place in Pasadena while we rehearsed for the tour, and then we did 2 U.S. tours, and yeah, so it was a great experience. There's a lot to it, but that's the basic answer.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's backtrack. Let's go to Seattle. Let's go all the way.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what was your start in music, especially? Like, was songwriting and just guitar? Was it just like, were you just, pop out of the womb and it was like just naturally you were drawn to it?
Yeah, it seems so. I think I just had some sort of synesthesia early on where music made me feel really, really good. When I was 2.5, my older brother, who's 17 years older than me, gave my parents Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band for their as a Christmas present, and they just filed it away with their Andy Williams and Don Ho records and didn't really pay attention. But I dragged it out and listened to it over and over and over, and so that's like the first early sense memory I have of connecting with music. And that album was so visual and so it was almost like a kid's record in a way, because every song was so like visual, like a video, like a movie went off in my mind when I heard the songs. And that sort of informed how I, in turn, grew up and wrote songs. I love songs that paint a picture and tell a story and make you travel. And I credit that early experience with that idea and that sensation. So that's kind of when it started.
What an album to be, that combination of pictures, because you can just look at the cover and just like stare at it for hours. And I still do. And then you're right, the style of the songs, I think of Mr. Kite and that build up of the carousel music. That is I think a fantastic intro to music, because you can't beat the Beatles. And then so was that just like the fascination where it just kind of like developed, where you kind of chased after, I guess, that fascination?
Yeah, really. I mean, for years I listened to that record. I didn't even know there were other Beatles records, and I didn't even really know there were other bands. I was just like, this is music, And then another distinct memory is learning the theme song to a television show called The Munsters. It's like this.
Okay.
I loved you name checked Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. That was one of the ones I really loved because it was scary. I loved kind of spooky stuff. And so the Munsters theme was the first song I learned by ear on piano. And so, yeah, it just became like, I hear something I like, I want to grab it and make it my own and play it over and over again and swim in those waters. So that kind of is where the urge to sort of grab the ghost of a song out of the air and fixate it to affix it to a medium really was born with Sgt. Pepper's and the Munsters.
I love that. So piano was kind of like the intro instrument, and that's awesome. When did guitar did you kind of like piecemeal other instruments and not just piano, but just like slowly put them together as a way of musical expression?
No, it was really just piano from the time I was about 4 to 14. I was kind of being groomed to be a concert pianist in a way. I mean, I remember feeling or hearing adults talking like, okay, let's get him on to the next level. And, kind of, I felt like I was being sort of ushered into a life that I didn't understand. But eventually, after years and years of playing piano, I picked up my dad's acoustic guitar and found how to make an E chord and strummed a full E chord and went, oh man, that is so much better. That's so much better. There's so much more richness in this experience than playing dead people music on piano. Not that I did play Joplin and some stuff I loved, like In the Hall of the Mountain King by Grieg. I remember learning that, and that's another scary one. That bum 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 bum. So I had a pleasant experience with piano, but it definitely like music sort of turned on when I strummed that big old E chord on the acoustic guitar. And then of course I discovered electric guitar, and that was even better, and I was off to the races.
Now, at that point, when you pick up the electric guitar, do you start forming bands and just like, because I feel like at first everybody kind of forms, nobody stays in one band forever. It's kind of like these bands kind of form and then a member leaves, and then eventually it kind of like, I don't know, it just gels, and that's how you kind of learn about songwriting a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. At first my first band was ridiculously weird. It was me. Okay, so it was this guy, Arnie, on bass, and he was just a genius on the bass. Like a child prodigy, just totally could play. This guy, Dennis Sway, on guitar. He was a Hawaiian guy playing like a distorted SG guitar, and then I lay down on the ground and I played a tiny little Casio VL tone, which is basically like a calculator that's also a keyboard. And I took half of a headphone and I put it on the speaker of the keyboard, and I tapped that for the drums, and I sang into it for the vocals, and I played the little Casio keyboard all at the same time while lying on the floor. Because we had no, keyboard stands, mic stands, really no PA at all. And so, yeah, it's these two guys standing up and me on the floor, and we had one song, but we thought we were in a band. It's like the classic, the band where it's like drums, guitar, and a clarinet, because that's the only instrument that the kid can play. Anyway,
what was the song title? Do you remember?
Well, it's a little un-PC now, but we were called Spastic Action, and after the Rolling Stones song Satisfaction, we were called Spastic Action. And I Can't Get No Spastic Action was one of our songs. And then actually we had two songs. We had that, and then we had the song, God, what was it called? I actually think I have it here. Hold on.
Oh my goodness.
Spastic
That is amazing.
Action. Oh, Useless Information. That's right. Here, listen. Here it is. I don't know if you... Well, wait. Okay. I have to unplug the headphones. So that's it, and that was me. You can hear dun 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 dun. That's me tapping the headphones and singing, and you can hear the little keyboard in the background. So yeah, it was trying to be like a punk rock band, but I think in retrospect it was more punk rock than a lot of things I've seen in my life.
Then I guess so it's almost like that's a time for experimentation. At what point did you put the calculator down? And then slowly...
Yeah. There's no way we were going to do a gig like that, so it became pretty obvious early on. And then I bought a guitar, from a kid at school for $100, mm-hmm. and just tried to be the Sex Pistols for the next 2 years. But and the Clash, I was just into like punk rock, classic punk rock from the late '70s. And just tried to do that punk rock thing, and then eventually kind of my personality as sort of a visual songwriter started coming out, because I realized, I think deep down, like I can't really, grow up in suburbia and be in a real punk rock band, because that's just not me. And so I just started kind of writing these. I did write these kind of angsty songs about growing up in suburbia, but they were more arty. I got into like, English art, new wave kind of stuff, and so they were kind of flowery, and I I embarrassingly probably sang with like a fake English accent for a while there in the 80s, and oh man, I have tons of recordings that nobody will ever hear because they're just so embarrassing.
Now, do you feel like the style of how you viewed playing the guitar and writing songs kind of changed from like kind of like from that punk rock standpoint to eventually like, okay, I'm gonna, maybe change a little bit dynamically how I play or some of the chord voicings that I choose?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. Early on, I didn't like doing bar chords. I couldn't really figure out, I couldn't like get a bar chord to work for me, and I was impatient. So I figured out how to play this funny C-based bar chord where it was like root fifth and then the net what was it? It was like root fifth and then I would skip the next string and then there was the third and then you know and the B and the E would kind
Yeah.
of or the B string would always ring out because I wasn't fingering it. So I would come up with these crazy weird chords and then I took the low E string off and I played an A bar chord, which is basically just like clamping your finger almost straight across. So that was an early indication of where I would end up, which is playing 2 and 3 string guitars that are tuned, root fifth root straight across. So you can just put your finger straight across and make a chord. But at the time, I just did it because I was impatient and I wanted it to sound good, but I didn't want to practice. So, and I still to this day can't play a regular bar chord. I play this here. Actually, hold on. I'll grab a guitar here. I'll show you what I mean. I happen to have a rare 6-string guitar here in my world. So there's a C. So my bar chord would be like, what would that be? A G or an A? And then skip that one.
Yeah.
And that B is ringing out. So it's like.
Oh.
So you get this like weird kind of dissonant thing happening a little bit. And anyways, to this day, that's my screwed up bar chord. I can kind of like cram my hand. There's a real bar chord, but that took me all that time to make it. So,
but it's interesting how you kind of stumble on things of a desire or necessity to just be like, I'm just going to do this. Like, I don't think at any point in Keith Richards' career, I'm sure there are people who are like, do you want us to maybe put the 6th string on there for you, Keith, like right up top? And he's not going to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe I should. He's like, no, this is working for me. I'm going to go with it. Now, I'm curious. So as you're developing, you're doing these bands and you're how do you come across back? Do you guys just kind of meet as friends and just playing in bands, bands passing by?
Well, no, it was kind of an intentional meeting. So when I lived in Boston, I was acquainted with and was in a band with this girl named Mary Lou Lord, and that was fun. And we played on the street and we played in clubs. And then years later, I got a call from her saying, hey, I share a publicist with this guy named Beck, and he just got signed and he needs to put together a band. And I thought of you to be in his band. And so we're coming to Seattle. He was doing like a residency tour up and down the West Coast, kind of doing multiple shows in different cities. And he came to Seattle, and Mary Lou introduced me to him, and I watched him play an acoustic set. And talk about movies going off in my head. I don't think I had as many movies going off since I was 2.5 listening to Sgt. Pepper's. I mean, his songs just made all these images, snap, crackle, pop through my brain. And I told him so afterwards. And I think we bonded on that idea of writing songs that make your mind turn on. So one thing led to another. And my audition was going to Olympia and playing on one of his records, playing slide guitar, which he was looking for a slide guitarist. I had no idea how to play slide guitar. I didn't own a slide or a guitar that could be a slide guitar. So I actually, before I got on the bus to go to Olympia, I went to a music store. I bought an old harmony and a slide, and I went right to the bus station. I got on the bus, went right to Olympia, got off the bus, walked to Calvin Johnson's house, went into the basement, immediately into the recording booth, and they said, play slide on this song. And I had no idea. I'd never heard the song. I didn't know how to play slide guitar. But, he wasn't looking for proficiency. He was looking for vibe and kind of like a homemade slapdash approach, not kind of, hunting and pecking is what he was after. And I definitely was hunting and pecking. So anyway, it was kind of an arranged meeting that turned into me being in his band for the first 2 US tours and living with him in LA and kind of, watching him undergo the transformation from, bedroom 4-tracker to international superstar, and we talked about that transformation a lot. And then when it came time for me to do that with the Presidents, I felt like I had been to fame school with Beck. And so it was a perfect sequence of events, really. So it was kind of magical.
Now that to me is number one, super fascinating. That's like slide guitar. Sure. It's that boldness of just being like, yeah, I absolutely, I can do that. And then it's like, okay, I got to get a slide. And it's just to just go and be like, hey, are you ready to track? You bet. All right. Here we go. But like what you touched on, feel and vibe, I feel, especially for songwriting and when you're playing guitar, is super important. If it is not there, if feel and vibe is like, not there. You could be absolutely proficient and amazing. It feels dead.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel real.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about recording in the digital realm is that you can take, like oftentimes I will take an old recording that's sort of, from a 4-track that's kind of not exactly right, but it's got the vibe, and I'll throw that into a Pro Tools session and cut it into a loop. And then or just play to it and then eventually remove the old recording. But I've hijacked the feeling of the old recording and I've kind of got that. Or sometimes I keep, bits and pieces of the old recording in there. There's a song on my one of my latest Casper records called Termite. And it's me playing this, me way back in like 1990 or 91, playing this Doombeck, this drum where you put your hand in it and change the tone of it. And I just did this jam with the Doombeck, whatever. And then, 30 years later, I was listening to it while doing the dishes, which I listen to these old fragments while I do chores. And it popped out at me, and I suddenly imagined like an army of termites walking across a field about to devour a house. And suddenly a song was born. So it's cool because you can also use that sloppiness and that moment of inspiration to actually create something finished as well.
I find that that's such a good idea to like listen to, like things that are older, segments, song clips while you're doing random things to see like if they strike you differently.
Yeah, that's how Lump, the President's hit song Lump was written. That was me cleaning my room, listening to a little micro cassette recorder full of ideas. And I heard myself singing, she's Lump, she's in my head. I do not remember making it up. No,
really?
I don't.
Oh my goodness.
But
Okay.
I had the chorus on this little micro cassette thing. And I remember thinking, it pricked my ears like, ooh, what's that? That's definitely me singing, but I don't remember making that up. And then I wrote the verses and, borrowed I didn't even own a 4-track at that time. I had to borrow one from my neighbor. My neighbor, who coincidentally was Laurie Goldston, who played cello for Nirvana on the MTV Unplugged special, which is weird. Her 4-track is the one I borrowed and recorded all the hits for the Presidents because I somehow didn't own a 4-track at the time. So
that to me is just like number one. That is so cool. The fact that again, you're just listening to things and you're like, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
I like that. And to me, sometimes I think people, especially now when they're writing songs, they're bummed if they're just like, I don't have a song. But it's like maybe those clips later on suddenly strike you. It's just like, don't get rid of your ideas because maybe they didn't in the moment didn't form. But it's like, give it time and maybe something's going to strike you differently.
Yeah, it's true. And you never know, I've gone through so many different phases of styles and genres and different bands and finally landing on kids music. But along the way, if I have an idea for a straight up country Western song, I just write it and record it and file it away. Because who knows, maybe in another 20 years, I'm in a country band and you just don't know. And sometimes when those things happen, they are glimpses into the future of like maybe you're tapping something in your imagination that's eventually going to bear fruit, but you just can't see it at the time. So my advice would be record everything. I mean, I have thousands and thousands of fragments. And for the last few Casper albums, I went through all those fragments and kind of did that listening, kind of casual listening thing. And several really good songs were plucked from, the dusty depths.
The Dusty. Now that's a good album title for your future country album in 20 years. Dusty.
The Dusty Depths. Really hard to say.
So when you graduated from, let's say, Beck School, and it's just kind of moved, and you moved in, and you're writing Lump. At was there kind of a moment when you realized like this album's doing really well? When it just kind of hit you, where like you put it together, and then it comes out, and then you're like, wow, this is like. Did you have in your mind that it was going to be big, or was it just like, did it take you a little bit by surprise?
Very much by surprise. I have a distinct memory of finishing a rehearsal and going to get into Dave Dieterer's car, who was the guitar player, and over the roof of the car, as he gets in the driver's side and I get in the passenger side, he says, you know, if somebody wanted to pay us a bunch of money to sign with a major label and tour all over the world and play these songs and make videos, I'd totally do it. And I said out loud, me too, while thinking in my mind, you are insane. Nobody is going to pay us any money to play these silly, stupid little songs, and which was fine with me. I was completely content just being, playing a couple, 4 times a month in Seattle as just a thing to make life interesting. So I guess flash forward to actually getting signed and having all the experiences we did, it seemed improbable at its very core to me. It seemed, which kind of made it seem unsafe and weird and something that wasn't a destination that I wanted to kind of hang out in for a long time. I always felt like there was something else I was supposed to be doing when the Presidents were really hitting it big. But I do remember when the album sold over 1 million copies, and that felt like a moment where like, okay, this is actually happening. And then when we would get up, after making videos for MTV and then going on tour and having at that time the crowd had this sort of like part to play in the show because they were watching other crowds on MTV freak out, like Pearl Jam live videos and stuff like that. So the crowd was just like another band member, basically. They were going crazy the whole time. So that was another moment where I was like, oh, wow, this is a force that's bigger than us.
Now, I talked to a few weeks ago Jim West, who plays guitar for Weird Al.
Oh yeah.
What was the experience? Do you feel like it's something when it's like you write a hit song, but then when you get the call that like, hey, Weird Al wants to parody your song, what is that like?
Well, apparently, and I don't remember this, but I think I don't remember how I found out that he wanted to cover it, but Al and I are still really good friends. And I was asked this question the other day, like, where were you when you saw the video for Gump the first time? And I couldn't remember. And I asked Al, like, what happened when that video came out? Did we talk about it or anything? And he's like, dude, you were on my tour bus. I played you the video. He remembers it because it was the only time he ever debuted a video for the artist in person. So we were on his tour bus apparently, and he played me the video and we talked about it and hung out and all that stuff. But I have no memory of it, which is just a testament to all the things there are to forget in life.
No.
If you don't remember Weird Al debuting the video in which he plays you on his tour bus, then I don't know. I don't know what else I'm forgetting.
Well, that to me, now that's even cooler, that the story of Weird Al telling you the story of him playing you the music video. It's just a really cool, that in itself. Now, eventually now I knew you from the Presidents of the United States, but at first I did not make the connection as a teacher. I had a student, shout out to Griffin, to give him full credit for this. He came in and he had this 3-string guitar and he said he wanted to learn Butterfly Driving a Truck. And I was like, okay. I was like, is that the name of the song? And he was like, yes. And I was like, are you sure? I was like, that's okay. Well, let's see. I was like, Casper Baby Pants. I was like, okay. And I played the song and I was like, this is good. And I was like, I wonder who this guy is. And I was like, oh, what? How? Okay. So now I guess.
Yeah.
How did you make that transition? Was there to Casper Baby Pants, kind of like the alter ego, how did that come about?
Well, it kind of goes back to the little kid listening to Sgt. Pepper's. I mean, the experience I had in my mind was so vivid and so real and so innocent and just sort of like elemental. And I always, throughout my life, for some reason, my drive has always been to make music that represents who I am 100% transparently. Like I don't want to have to put on, say, like Kiss makeup or a suit, a special outfit, metaphorically or otherwise, to go on stage and do my thing. I don't want to have to like cloak myself in a persona. And the presidents were really close, but there was a little bit of like sort of adult wink wink sort of, innuendo in that music that wasn't something that I felt like super close to. I felt close to the innocent part, like kitties and peaches and lumps and froggies and all that. But then that extra layer of adult theme was something that I didn't really have a handle on or felt like it was really me. So Casper was really just this realization that, oh, I can remove that adult innuendo part and just be the innocent part and still write the same kinds of songs and still write visual songs and silly songs. And when I realized that, it just felt like a big weight was lifted off and I felt this clarity. And then the volcano of ideas just started erupting. And I just, in May, I released my 17th Casper album, and they have about 20 songs on them, so they're not short albums. And I've got two more full-length records. I've got one coming out in November, and then the other one I think I'm going to sit on until the pandemic is over and we can actually all get together. So that'll bring me to 19 records, which I think is the extent of my legacy. We'll see, but yeah. So it was really about uncovering and sort of who I was already. This like innocent, story-based songwriter, and once I found it, it was just really relaxing and exciting.
Now, is it kind of the same process as you're describing where sometimes you'll just go through those clip ideas? Does it ever start with you just picking up your guitar and then just kind of like being like, with those, the three strings? I think I forget which video I saw you playing. I think it was Tiny,
Tiny Explosions?
It was, yes. And I saw a picture of you playing guitar.
Yeah.
And it was just like three strings.
Right.
So it's just like, is that kind of like pretty much all instruments that you have at this point? Like what is a process of recording a song like Casper Baby Pants, like any from the album? What is it like, the process for you to like sort out the ideas and then start tracking?
It's a long process for most songs. Even if it isn't a long process for writing, the recording is a long process because I do it alone. So one of the things I learned from being in a band is that I'm not supposed to be in a band, that I have a vision. And I've always kind of felt like the band, like drums, bass, guitar, vocal, it's like primary colors. And those are great. It's like red, yellow, blue, maybe green. But and those, people that work with those colors, it's great and fantastic. But I really wanted to use every color in the paint box. I wanted to use strings and classical instruments, hillbilly instruments, electric guitars, acoustic guitars, horns, anything I could get my hands on. I wanted to not be limited that way. So, being solo really helped. So with that in mind, the process that I worked out is I'll take a moment of inspiration, whether it's picking up a guitar, whether it's a song idea that a kid sends me, which happens sometimes, or finding an old song in my library that's unfinished that sparks a new idea. I'll just go for it. I'll write it, write more verses than I need usually. And kind of, the writing process is like no bad ideas, just keep it going, and then kind of find the story and the lyrics. And somewhere in there, I'll start recording the actual thing in Pro Tools. And the early stages are uninhibited. Like I just throw everything I want on there, like distorted guitar, mandolin, banjo, whatever. And then much later, I'll listen to the song and I'll do a mute party where I'll just start muting things like, okay, let's get rid of that electric guitar, except maybe in this one little moment where it's kind of cool. And so I'll just sculpt by taking away, and then eventually I take enough away that the song is very clear and the lyrics are very available for young ears to hear. I'm always very conscious about making the story and the lyrics up front, and the music is there to support, and letting the music be complex enough in some cases that the parents and the older siblings can be entertained, but letting the lyrics be simple enough that a kid 0 to 6 year old can grab it, or vice versa. I let the music be really simple so a 0 to 6 year old can grab it, and the lyrics get more complex so that the parents and the older kids are taken care of. So I kind of allow these like different elements to balance depending on what the song requires and how a family stuck in a traffic jam in a car with a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old are going to experience it. So there's just a lot of modification, remixing, balancing. So it starts out really sloppy and then it gets very precise as the song goes on. But that process can take anywhere from 3 months to years and years. I mean, I have some songs on this record I'm putting out in November that I recorded, 4 or 5 years ago, and it's taken that long to kind of understand how they're really supposed to be represented. So it's patience.
That is to me, especially when you said, I feel like when I record too, and when I'm mixing things and I'm putting them together, it is a takeaway party. It's like, what can I take away? It's just like, it's just not necessary, because it's not about, people are like, oh, do you add more stuff? It's like, it's taking away until where it's just like, that actually feels a lot better.
Yeah. I can't tell you the amount of times I've like tracked a bunch of guitars thinking they were the backbone of the song, and then put on a bass and a little percussion, and then I'll get rid of all the guitars and it's just bass and percussion. I'm like, oh, there it is. There's the song.
Now, this your story at the beginning of you being influenced by, the experiencing the Beatles makes sense, because you have Baby Beatles, in which you cover. It's just like, oh, it comes full circle. Now, were those selections of songs just ones that you felt were it's kind of like a whole bunch from their catalog, but to me, how do you license a Beatles song and go through that process?
Yeah, it was a learning experience for sure, on a lot of levels. I mean, there's two Beatles. I did two. I did Baby Beatles and Beatles Baby. And I had a couple criterias. Number one, they had to have written the song. So I didn't do songs where they were covering someone else's stuff. Mm-hmm. Number two, it had to be kind of visual, because I wanted to pay homage to that kind of paint a picture kind of thing. Or about like love in a universal way, not as much girl, I love you, girl, this kind of thing, but more like the kind of love song that could be a parent to child love song. So that kind of narrowed the field, and then I started recording them, and that narrowed it further, like the ones that I really resonated with. But unpacking those songs and sort of dissecting them and opening them up and stripping them down to the bones was very informative as a songwriter, like understanding how they did some key changes and some rhythm changes, and like seeing the workings of these songs that I'd lived with for so long was super fun. And then the practicality of licensing them was an adventure, because George Harrison was on this funny little publishing company called Wixon, and they were kind of weird to deal with, and Lennon and McCartney were with Harry Fox, and so I had to write a lot of checks to different places. Oh, and Love Me Do is owned by Yoko Ono. Yoko Ono owns half of 4 of the early Beatles hits, and so I have to pay half royalties to Yoko and half to Harry Fox. So it was, it's an accounting thing. I've got a spreadsheet, and every quarter I have to write little tiny checks to the Beatles. So, so it's definitely a learning curve, but I'm really glad I did it, because, I wanted to pay homage to that connection. And also I get a lot of feedback from families saying that when kids listen to my Beatles records, they think it's actually the Beatles, or they think that's what those songs sound like. And then when they hear the real Beatles albums, a lot of times they're like, that's not the Beatles. They think I'm the Beatles.
I can attest to that. I can attest to that, because we've learned obla di obla da. And I remember telling Griffin, I was like, well, this was done by the Beatles. And he was like, no. He was like, they did not. And I was like, here, let me show you. It's off the White Album. And he was like, no, that is, are they covering? And they thought the Beatles were and it's just like, but I love this because it's an introduction to the Beatles, but it's like, and you're right, the way I feel when people say kids music, they're this like, oh, but the thought and how you arrange, and you give detailed thought into this, but there's like pop sensibility too in your songs, where I can teach one of them, and I know that it's going to be like, I'll be doing chores, and then halfway through the day, it's just like, butterfly, All right. And butterfly. And then my girlfriend was like, what are you singing? I was like, butterfly dragonfly. She was like, what's that? And then I remember just sharing the album. So to me, and I love just the story that we've gone through, how you've just chased after things that you either jumped in, sometimes you jump in with a slide guitar being like, here we go, let's figure this out. And then being like, that's a good song. Maybe that could be a thing. And then suddenly, you know what? I think I need to strip it down to this. It seems like you've just chased after the curiosity.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that's really helped is understanding who I'm making the music for and what environment I'm making it for. Like I specifically put myself in a car in a traffic jam leaving Yosemite National Park in August, and everybody in the car is hot and hungry and tired and mad, and they all have to pee. And you should be able to put the CD in and it should help. And I will literally sit back and listen to a mix when I think a song is approaching completion and be in that car and go, oh, no, that mandolin right there is not going to help. Or that hi-hat has too much treble on it. We got to dial that back. And so it's a science in a way, like an emotional science, but kind of a science. Way more than I ever experienced making music for adults. I think adults are much more forgiving with sloppiness and inarticulate vocals and, general sort of energy being passable as genius. But kids, I've found, will respond, and families will respond to super well-crafted, storytelling-based, songs of all kinds. I mean, one of the things I really like about how I make music as Casper is I genre hop, like I have one song that's kind of groovy and electronic and one song that's very acoustic and country and then a jazzy thing. And I can go all over the map, which I love. So it also, I hope, exposes kids to all those different genres and, exposes them to classical music on some levels and pop and whatever else I'm channeling. So I like that.
Which I think is amazing because it's showing them just basically so many different palettes of styles to be like, it's okay if you're drawn to this. Cool. That's the avenue. Then go chase after that now. Be curious. It's like you're sending them on their own curiosity. You're kind of giving permission to be like, go forth.
Yeah.
and find out what drives and creates and what all the things that I've done, you go find yours.
Yeah, definitely. And it can help you figure out what you don't like too. Like, I remember as a kid, I collected Charlie Brown comics in book form. And for some reason, I didn't like the baseball themed ones. I was just like, I don't want the baseball themed ones. And I don't know why, but suddenly that popped into my head when you were talking, like it can not only show kids the genres they want, but also the ones they don't want. Like, I don't like country music, like you can figure that out,
Oh, but Chris, thank you so much. Like, just hearing your journey, so many cool stories. I'd love to talk one day more about this because I feel like we're only scratching the surface. If there's bound to be more.
Oh, it's true. I mean, I have a lot of theories about why this kind of music is important for the empathetic parent-child relationship, which I feel is how we're going to save the world, which is making babies that grow up feeling supported and taken care of. And me making this music is just like participating in that in a small way, but a way, that I've found to make it, Anyway, the bottom line is I haven't even told you the story about almost crushing Madonna's dog. I mean, there's so many.
Oh,
That'll have to be a cliffhanger.
I like that. Let's leave that as the cliffhanger. And then next time you're going to explain that. Oh my goodness. Well, Chris, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Can you feel the tension that we just ended right there? That cliffhanger? The tension between Chris, Madonna's dog. We're going to have to bring Chris back on because we need to know what happens. I just wanted to take this time right now to say thank you. Thank you for listening every week. Thank you for sending me emails on your favorite episodes, sharing on social media. I read each one, and I'm so excited for the future of this podcast. The episodes we've already recorded, the episodes that we're about to record, I'm super stoked on. So remember, If you are loving these episodes, feel free to write a review on Apple Podcasts, share on your social media platforms, because every single one absolutely helps. That does it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. This was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Until next time.